Good morning, everybody. I just want to make sure my sounds are up. There we go. So today is Saturday, June 13th. I don't know, that number is ringing in my head for some reason, and I don't know why and the specifics around it. So we'll find out if something comes to me from a spiritual perspective. So today we're going to talk about what I do, honestly. There was a request to kind of talk about the services that I offer at Mind, Body, Soul Wellness Center. And a lot of you that know me know that I am a Jane of a lot of trades. But when it comes to the business, there's certain aspects that most of you probably know about, but then there's probably others that you don't unless you look at my website. But what ends up coming about is when I talk about my services, some of it can get very technical. And as you know, I am not a technical person. I won't speak in a very scientific way unless I'm reading something, which I know takes away from the organic feel of me just having a conversation with you. So when you see me look down, it's just to stay on track of, topic of conversation of services. And what I want to do is talk about it in the way that I would speak about it to anybody that comes to see me. So if you want to know some scientific aspect of it, put it in the comments and I will try and include it in or get back to you after the fact. So Mind, Body, Soul Wellness Center. Obviously, with COVID right now, I'm limited to taking people inside the office. The room that I'm currently in is what I would call my spirit room or my counseling session room. And I'll get into what I mean by counseling session later. It's a little different from those that have been in here because I have this wonderful chair to sit in, but that's because of doing the amount of videos and online face-to-face calls that I've been doing since COVID had occurred. So that will change most likely unless I decide to keep the comfy chair for whoever comes in and modify as needed for some of the people that come in with more than one person. And again, I'll talk about that as we go further. So I'm just going to get right into it. There's a waiting room for those of you who have never been here. It is by appointment only, mostly to control anybody who's coming in once we're allowed to open up due to the restrictions here. And then I also have a treatment room for the body work that I do. So includes a table. I do not do traditional massage anymore. Even though my license is a licensed massage therapist, I am strictly doing MFR for a body perspective. The reason being, and MFR is also known as myofascial release, which is also recently termed in the medical community as interstitial. So anytime you have a diagnosis that includes interstitial, they're talking about the fascia system, which I'm going to go into some details about that in a moment. But the myofascial release, which treats the fascia system, that is the best way to diminish our aches and pains and avoid potentially surgery as well as pain meds. And depending on the degree of the diagnosis and how long you've been in it and the type of diagnosis, you can pretty much have it eliminated without surgery or medicine, pain meds, which obviously in today's environment, the opioid crisis, which did affect me, those that may or may not know, my son, who is behind me over this side, passed away due to fentanyl use, which wasn't even something that he sought out, but it was given to him on purpose. So opioids, obviously, if we can avoid them altogether, It reduces potential addiction in a lot of people, because there's a lot of people who have been on heroin due to opioids that were prescribed due to an injury or pain. So myofascial release can help with that. So before I go into the details of it, I'll give you a little personal story about it. So I started my myofascial release career 2015, right? Yeah, I have to think about it. It's been 5 years. And the reason being is because when I had met the facility Inner Circle Rehabilitation, which I talked about last week as well, they were already doing myofascial release. And I had gone to them because my ankle gave out one day. I woke up, got out of bed, and I couldn't put any weight on my ankle without excruciating pain. I remember what I did the night before. I was out with some girls for a friend's birthday, and although I was out, I didn't injure it. I didn't roll it. I didn't do anything to aggravate the injury. I had already been dealing with chronic knee pain since I was about 20 years old. My knee issue started at 16, when it felt like my knee was just giving out when I would go up the stairs. It felt like it was slipping out of place, even though it wasn't, but that's the way it kind of felt. And at the time, 16 years old, you go to the doctor and they tell you to go to physical therapy, and physical therapy says do these exercises. What 16-year-old's going to do that unless they're forced to? They're not, and that's what happened. By the time I was 20, I started to have knee pain. If I used it too much, if I went up too many stairs, it was more situational, but it was just the snowball that started, excuse me, the effect of where I landed by the time I was 33 years old. So about 10 years later, I would come home in excruciating knee pain, to the point where I would just spend hours icing my knees to just try and diminish the pain. And when I say hours, I really mean hours. I was not one to take pain meds, even though my orthopedic kept saying, take pain meds. I don't like the way opioids make me feel. I don't like feeling loopy. And then also my ex-husband had addiction issues to alcohol. And when he would try and stay sober, he would do other means to numb out. And that would include any pain meds that I happened to have had. So I avoided that from being in the house altogether. And so the strongest I would take would be ibuprofen, 800 milligrams, which worked fine. Took the edge off kind of thing, and ice took care of the rest. So I sat behind a desk all day, so it wasn't like I was using my knees walking around, even though that is a lot of strain in a sitting position. When we tend to think about sitting, it's like, oh, well, we're not standing, but we're also in a lot of bends and pulls and shortening and longing of muscles, which I've later learned in my massage career. So at 33, I'm at a point of just complete destruction of the knees, and my orthopedic is saying, when I'm 50 or 60, have both of my knees replaced. Until then, there's nothing they can do. And you're probably wondering, well, why is that the case? Well, as we know with knee replacements, they're putting metal into our bones to give you a whole new joint. What our body, which is a wonderful system, likes to do and wants to do is attack anything that's foreign in there. And that includes, metal, titanium, whatever it is that they're using. Which I believe is titanium more now. And over time, as it's trying to attack that metal, it instead attacks the bones. And so the holes that are holding our new hardware in, it starts to deteriorate, and then a new knee replacement would occur. So that's why sometimes you have to do them again. So having one done at 30 with an expected life for an average person is into their 80s, 70s or 80s, that would mean that my bones would get to a point where it couldn't support anything. I didn't like that idea. I'm not one to just go rush to surgery to begin with. I try and find other ways, or I just deal with it. And mostly because as a mom, and as all you moms out there know, and dads out there know, sometimes there's just no room for you, and that you are constantly putting yourself to the side for your significant other, and especially your children. So, and that was my life. Morgan was my world, and I couldn't be weak for him, because it's just where I was at emotionally and mentally. So my knee goes, or my ankle goes out. Go to a new ortho, because I was really frustrated with the orthopedic saying constantly, just take pain meds, even though I told him why I don't take pain meds, and wait for full knee replacements. So I go to a new person. He has great bedside manner. I really like the guy, at least most of who he was or is. But the best thing is after 3 months of being in a boot, he sent me to Inner Circle Rehabilitation, which he had an affiliation with through referrals. So this Inner Circle has been practicing MFR for a very long time, and it changed my life. Not only do I no longer have, for the most part, knee pain, I have situational knee pain, but it's tolerable. It's not crippling like it was in the past. But being able to access my emotions through myofascial release has also helped me deal with some past issues that I have, to deal with how I see things in life, but then also with the loss of my son, to be able to process that in a different way. So when I started at Inner Circle, after about a week of, physical therapy as well as treatments, hands-on treatment, which I'll talk about in a moment, the therapist said to me, because I kept saying, I don't understand why my ankle did this. I think we all have that same question when we wake up in just excruciating pain, or something happened in the middle of the night. And yet we know that we didn't fall, or we didn't do anything that surface level would cause us to think that this is a problem. So I did the same thing, because I didn't understand my body. I'm not in a medical career, or at least I wasn't. And from the interactions I've had within the medical community from a day-to-day perspective since getting my license and doing myofascial release, a good 90% of the people in the medical career have no idea about the fascia system and myofascial release. There's a small percentage that do, which is very sad and discouraging, because once you get MFR, you realize how holistic healing should be. So I'm in that same mindset as everybody else, as most people, I'd say 90% of the medical community. And so I just kept saying, I just don't understand. I don't understand, like, what happened. Why would I just wake up like this? And the therapist said, well, it's not your ankle. It's not your knees. And I'm looking at him like he's crazy. What? It's not these things. It is your hips. It is your chest. It is your neck. You have, a rotation of the hips as well, not only forward, but then to the side with an upslip, which means that everybody has seen somebody that looks like a leg is shorter than the other. It's not that the leg is shorter. It's just what's happening within the muscles in the hip area and in your side of the body. As well as your chest is rotated into a direction, and your head's forward, creating that hump that you see as time goes on for a lot of people. And I was like, I didn't notice the hips until I was shown that these were a problem. I didn't know the rib cage until that was shown. I did notice the hump. My family has it, so I just assumed that was a family genetic disorder, when in fact it wasn't. It's just structural within gravity. So, therapist said, if I work on these other issues, I guarantee your pain is going to go away. And sure enough, it did. So I got to avoid double knee surgery at, 50, 60 years old, which I'm 45. I don't mind talking about my age. So within a short 7 years, and not even that, because it's been 7 years since I started the MFR journey for myself. Within a year, I had a significant decrease to almost zero pain in my knees that I had been suffering since I was 16. So once that happened, I was like, this is perfect. This is going to fit into what I'm already doing, which was the spiritual stuff. So I went and got my license as a massage therapist strictly to do MFR, because it takes less time to get that than it does to get a physical therapy degree or an occupational degree or any kind of therapist degree out there. So what is myofascial release? Now that I've told you the story. So myofascial release is releasing of the fascia system. The fascia system, and I should have printed out some pictures, but I don't know if I can include them in here, and I don't want to take the time to figure it out. So I'm going to describe it to you. So within our body, there is this web-like system that goes from head to toe under our skin, as well as weaves in and out of every part of our muscles, our organs, our bone structure, our cells, and recently even has gone down to be shown to see around our DNA. So this thing is everywhere. And what it is, it's where our fluid runs through the system. It's where our blood vessels are. It's where our nerves are. It's basically the packing material, which in a story that I heard is how a medical professor had explained it to his class, and that it was just, get the packing material out of the way to see the muscles, to see, the blood vessels, to see the nerves, to see all these things. So, but because it's so vast and because of its functionality, when that gets disrupted, it creates our dysfunctions and our pains and our diagnoses, really, as science is starting to kind of catch up on. So when we're born, we probably will see it from time to time, where it looks like, a shoulder's a little higher than the other. And if that continues on, or a leg might be a little bit higher than the other, if that continues on throughout that child's life, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. For us, for somebody who maybe don't see it at birth, when there's a lot of restrictions at birth, even just putting the head back together, who's to say it was put back the way that it truly was formed? And if it's even slightly off, then that's going to create additional pulls through the system. But for most people who perceive to be normal and there's really no issues, life starts to create our dysfunctions. Because we have to be within gravity, if we start getting pulled out of it, the body has to compensate for that, right? So think of levers. So one of the biggest descriptions I tell people when they say, well, why would my hip be up a little higher than the other? It's all about patterns of holding. The easiest way that I can describe it is, we've all heard of frozen shoulder syndrome, where the shoulder may have had an injury, may have had surgery, something occurred, and now your shoulder's stuck and it can't move. The fascia system is so smart and so intelligent within our body that when we have to, and we'll use frozen shoulder when it comes to an injury. So you injure it, doctor puts you in a sling. When you first go into the sling's supposed to take off the weight of that, but our conscious minds wants to hold it, like we don't want to let it drop, we don't want to let go because it might hurt or whatever the case may be. So we start to contract our muscles around it, right? Which takes energy. Over time, the fascia system realizes what's occurring there in that holding pattern, and it starts to solidify a little bit to help you. But then once you're better, it hasn't unsolidified. So that's where myofascial release comes in. So in these areas that have started to solidify and help with some restrictions, what it ends up doing is it starts to melt that area. Because again, you have to remember there was, a fluid-like system in there, a gel-like system. And so as it starts to melt, it starts to release. And as it starts to release, it releases the tension on the nerves and the blood vessels and starts to just release and open up. And so you can have mobility back into that shoulder, back into the hip, back into the rotation that you're being pulled out of. As I was saying last week on self-help, and I'm sure anybody who watched it, you probably went into your rotations and see how far you can turn in one position versus the other. Those are restrictions. The pull forward of your neck is a restriction. Cancer has been, there's a great article out there if you Google search on breast cancer and pressure. And what they did is they put those cells of the breast under pressure. And when they did, it formed cancer. What is cancer? The body sees our cells as something that's not supposed to be there and starts to attack it, right? So the pressure changed the cells enough for the body to say, this is not okay, and we're going to attack it. And then we have diagnosis of cancer. In this study, when they released the pressure on those cells, the cells went back to normal. The body no longer looked at it as a problem and stopped attacking it, therefore becoming cancer-free. So it involves everything, including for people who have dementia. There's tightening of the head. I've treated people with dementia, and their head is so tight that after just a few treatments, they felt cognitively better. They could process things. But the downside is a lot of people, like most things, want, the quick fix. And whatever it is, even if it's not a quick fix, if it's a fix, I'll do it for as long as I need to until it's fixed. When it comes to our body, especially the fascia system, it is affected not only from our day-to-day life and our routines of holding patterns, but it's also affected from our emotional and mental states as well. And as I talked last week about what those are and how they affect us, that tightening from just an emotional perspective, such as why I believe I got cancer of losing Morgan, that adds into it as well. So you can get to a point where, like myself, where I became pain-free for the most part from my knees, definitely crippling pain, completely gone. But situational, too much, too many stairs, twisted it just right, the many things that can happen with a little bit of arthritis in the knee joints because of misalignment. Why do we get arthritis? We get arthritis because the space isn't functioning appropriately. So if your joints are not in the proper place and slightly shifted, it's going to rub funny. And if it rubs funny, then that starts to create arthritis. Putting it back in place doesn't undo the damage, but it helps put it into the right place so you have that less pain and dysfunction. So, but even with all that, I still have to either get treatment or self-treat in order to keep these patterns of holding and patterns of dysfunction from returning. Because the body already knows, like, hey, I already know this path. I already know this direction. And we were pretty cool here for a long time. But now, not so much. And a lot of times when you get myofascial release and you start to feel those pulls out of place, you know to either get a treatment or start doing your self-help, at home. So whenever I see anybody, I tell them self-help is key, and you need to do this for the rest of your life. You don't necessarily have to do it every day. You may not need to do it every week, but you need to incorporate a self-help treatment, especially when you're starting to feel some pulls that are not okay or slight discomfort, the slight stress of the day. Myofascial release helps with stress as well. We tend to think of traditional massage as this it feels good, it releases endorphins and all that stuff, and that's why it's so great. But when you get a traditional massage, how well do you feel? For how long? Most people, maybe an hour, maybe less than a day. With myofascial release, you can feel pretty good for a few days, a week, for some people a month, depending on how early you catch some of the dysfunction that's going on. So, I know I talked a lot about Manifest Release, and it's already been 30 minutes, which is crazy. But the last thing I want to explain about Manifest Release is the truly like a basic technique of it. So you are clothed. You can wear a sports bra if for females and shorts if you want. You can wear your regular clothes. I'll work through the clothes. I work under the clothes if need be, if I'm sliding too much. And what I'm doing is holding at least 3 to 5 minutes. Go down to the depth barrier where your body's starting to push back and then wait. So it might seem like I'm not doing anything, and I've had a lot of people say that, but then the change that they felt over that day was so significant that they then become myofascial people forever and skip traditional massage altogether. So it's all about wait and hold. And as I wait and hold, I feel what's happening not only under where my hands are, but also where the pulls are coming from. So I might move a hand somewhere else or might switch altogether. So, you could have back pain, but it's coming from your neck. So I'll work your back for a little while, but then I'm going to move to your neck because with pain, a lot of times it's referred pain. It's not always in the area where you are experiencing the pain that you're experiencing. So, the other way that I explain Manifest Release, which is the more simple way, is think of an orange and cut it. When you cut it in half, you see the white stuff under the skin. You see this white stuff that creates the slices. And then you see the white stuff within the orange itself when you bite into it. That is a perfect visualization of what's going on within us. Obviously, the orange and all that white stuff is dried out. But for us, it's not, unless we have restrictions. So one of the other big diagnosis that comes from fascial restrictions are cysts. It's a fluid sac that's in there. So pretty much every diagnosis that somebody has can be helped, if not significantly reduced, to completely gone through Manifest Release. And I know that sounds like a bold statement and a strong one, but it's, in my opinion, what I've seen and worked on, it's true. Because if anything, it's reducing some of the problems. If it's not reducing 100% where you're having most of the pain, but it's helping elsewhere, which is going to help that. So I also do MFR on pets. They can use it too. They're more receptive than people because they don't let thought get in the way. All right, so wasn't expecting to talk about MFR that long, but it's great. It's like so powerful. MFR also helped me eliminate an airborne food allergy that I had suffered with since my airborne early 30s, late 20s, and then consumption around 4 or 5 years old. So that's also part of how my fascial release has helped. It's helped me process my son's death as well, because it allows you to get out of your thinking space and shift into truly your well-being and into your spirit mind is what I would call it, going into spirit stuff. So, all right. So I'm also technically a shaman. The West Coast over here don't typically think of shamans or use them in the ways that the East Coast does. Sorry, I said that backwards. Versus the West Coast. So I, for the most part, will just call myself a psychic medium. Again, it's just a label to help people understand what it is. But spiritual medium, since I guess I use more spiritual medium than psychic medium, but spiritual medium for almost 15 years now, since 2003? No, 2006. So 14 years. I had to think about it there for a while. Even though it's been there my whole life, I wouldn't consider myself a spiritual medium until I got the abilities under control. So as a spiritual medium, my abilities allows me to connect into any type of energy that is communicating with me. So whether it's by just full-on communication where they're speaking through my mouth, to imagery, to feelings, smells, it's whatever the spirits are giving me. I can tune into whichever channel that exists. In the office, I will do up to 4 people for the same cost, as a small little mini group, because that's how many I can have in here at once due to space limitations. I also will do over the phones, and recently added email questions where you can ask a question or up to however many, more than 10, for a certain cost, and I will connect and see what is said. When it comes to spiritual communication, I have no control over who's talking to me necessarily. I can't force a particular person to talk to me, whether they're not around because they took a job, and that's another whole discussion, or they're still in transition, which is, I think I've discussed already, but another discussion as well, or just they don't want to talk, which does happen, but someone will talk on their behalf, whether it's your spirit guides or another family member. So it's actually pretty fascinating. I let you record the conversation because I will not remember what I say to anybody in a spiritual communication setting. So I do suggest you record it, because in the moment, like most things, you're going to miss something that was said or how it was said. So whether you have somebody with you or you're recording, it's absolutely allowed. The other thing I do is groups, and that's where I will stand in front of a group of 5 or more, and prices change depending on between 5 and 10 people versus 11 and 20 people. But I stand in front of the group and I just communicate and jump around the room. Whoever's talking to me, we go from person to person to person. It's always a good time for the people, that are having the event, and it's informative. I use the last 30 minutes of these sessions to have people who didn't get a reading to ask a question, or for clarification if everybody got some information out of it. And it's the same way I do a single session. I open up and I communicate with whoever's there and what they want to say. All sessions only have positive energies in it. I expel all negative, which will lead me into negative house clearings and things like that. So the group is safe and will be safe no matter what. So negative spirits and house clearings. So I also do house clearings, or business clearings, whatever you want to call it, including negative energies from people. I have removed demon-like spirits that were trying to possess people. And I know possession is something that is controversial depending on religious beliefs and understandings, or just the thought process behind it. Yet I fully believe in them. I have dealt with them. I have seen demons. I have seen elementals, other worldly beings, something we would consider aliens, but they're actually from different dimensions. I have seen a vast amount of stuff in the work that I do because I am not intimidated by negative energy. And that's the big key. When you are intimidated by negative energy, or you have abilities but don't want to deal with the negative energies, then you won't be able to until you get past that insecurity, fear, whatever it is that's holding you back. I don't get affected by that. Yes, they can still hurt me. Yes, they can still come at me, and they have, but I'm not intimidated by them. So house clearings usually last about an hour. And I come out and I check to see what's going on, to see if there is, what kind of activity is causing the issues that you're experiencing. Is it related to the people in the house? Is it related to the grounds? What exactly is going on? And I balance it and make it go away. So just at a house clearing recently, got rid of a trickster, which is another dimensional being. And across the street saw that there was a demon that went between these two houses. And unfortunately, in me saying that, I had found out that the main house it tends to go to, which is trapped to the land by the Native American spirits of its day, um, causes people to kill themselves by fire. And the homeowner prior did set herself on fire. So, yeah, it's one of those things that if you ever want to truly experience it, let me know. I can include you to come to a session so you can experience it for yourself. So I also do past life regressions, as we saw in a prior video. Past life regressions can be from this life as well, and some things that you're holding on to in this life that you can't get past. So even though it says past life regression, it also incorporates this life, because even if we did access past life lives themselves, those lives are affecting this life. So it becomes a regression regardless of the memories that surface from this life or last. I do chakra balancings and the importance of chakra balancing themselves, which, in the end, they are frequency points of energy within our body that helps regulate the energy that is within us as well as around us. And since everything's energy, energy is vastly important. There are 7 main chakras on our body itself, and then there is 8 through 15 above our head that communicates into the universe, so to speak. And we can talk about chakras another session and really go into really deep stuff with that. But when we can balance them, open them, slow them down for some people who it's just firing, too much, then it helps regulate these areas that are off, that are key points. For example, well, not for example, but the 7 main ones that everybody's used to is you have the first chakra, which is the root or the grounding. The second is the sacral, which is your sexual being and creativity. The third is your solar plex, which is your personal power, self-esteem. The fourth is your heart, which most people know is, our ability to love and to be awakened to a spiritual awareness, and mostly to be loved. But the awakened to spiritual awareness is because our heart is considered the physical and spiritual side, where the two of those things meet. The fifth is our throat chakra, which, is regarding communication, regarding inner feelings and truths and thoughts. Our third eye, which most people just use that as part of spiritual connection, but it's actually the intuition for perception, imagination, memory, wisdom, and helps us make decisions. But the third eye is where, from a spiritual opening, things get clogged when we're blocking. So that's why, the third eye, as well as just the intuition. Intuition is spiritual connection. So 6, and then the 7th is our crown, and most people know that to be spiritual communication. But it's really spiritual connection versus communication. And it truly is the location between our physical body and our individual consciousness into a higher state, or the universal consciousness. And then those 8 through 15 adds into the actual spiritual communication and different processes in there. So when we can balance those, we tend to feel better about some things. A lot of people, their throat chakra is completely destroyed because we don't want to talk about what we're feeling inside or what we need from somebody. So that tends to get shut down, which then, causes issues with an energy transference within the body, and then add in body restrictions for the fascia system. And next thing you know, everything is just chaos. It's the reason that some of us have lymphedema in our legs when they didn't have surgery or any kind of issue that would have created a major dysfunction. It's a combination of trapped energy due to restrictions of myofascial release, and as well as the emotional conscious state that we're dealing with that affects our chakra balances. But MFR can absolutely affect our chakras and the locations of them as well. And that's why sometimes when you talk to somebody who's seen an acupuncturist, it's like a 50-50 thing. Like, you either hear it worked or it didn't work. And the reason it worked is the people that are doing it when it worked, those particular practitioners, they're taking in compensation, whether they realize it or not, of a dysfunction of where the meridian may be being pulled from. And so, if you take, let's just say your hips, right? And if one, the one hip's higher than the other, even if it's slight, I'm going to over dramatize it just to be case, and you're looking for a pinpoint in the middle, now that pinpoint has changed because it's not truly in the middle anymore. It's sheared, so it's like on an angle. And so our chakras do get messed up from our pulls within our system from dysfunction, surgery, trauma, physical trauma, emotional trauma. It all is connected. All right. I also offer classes for spiritual abilities for those who think that you have it, or maybe you want to open it because we're all born with spiritual connection. It's just we start to lose it when we're about 4 or 5 years old and we start grade school, and we shift from being in the moment to thinking. Once we start thinking, we shut them out. That's the only way I have peace in the day, is I think. So otherwise, they'd be knocking at my door, communicating all the time, 24/7. And you might think it's cool, but it's exhausting and it takes a lot out of a person. So, but I do offer classes. If you're interested, message me. You can go through the website and send me a message that way. You can message me on Facebook, depending on what you're watching this on, or if you're linked to my page on Facebook. Absolutely do that. That would be awesome. As well as subscribe to YouTube to get, notices and updates, as well as I can create my customized channel once I have a certain amount of followers. I'm looking to get a class together for those that already have like some form of intro into abilities. We're going to do it through Zoom because of COVID right now. The other thing that I offer that a lot of people don't necessarily realize is I do spiritual counseling. I haven't really discussed it, and I don't really think anybody knows that I am an ordained minister. So I am able to do spiritual counseling, as well as, marriages and things like that. But I haven't really talked about it or advertised it or mentioned it to anybody. It's probably been a few years since I got ordained, and originally I did it in thoughts to just add it as a service to the business. But since then, realized that spiritual counseling can be done through that. And what's the difference between spiritual communication, where you come in for a spiritual session, versus counseling? Spiritual counseling, it's more me utilizing the information the spirits are giving me about what you have an issue with, and incorporate that with, how do I say it? Trying to say it the right way. With real world situations. So I'm not 100% open to the spirit. So I'm going to remember everything I'm telling you, because it's an intermingle between real world and spirit. So it's a balance between the two. And it allows you to actually talk more than I would be talking. Whereas a spiritual session, whether it's in office or at in a group setting, I'm doing all the talking. And it's not even me, it's them. So you don't really talk at all. If you wanted to ask a question or clarify or whatever, then you do that. But it's pretty much just me going, like I'm doing now. But a spiritual counseling session, it allows you to talk more and get more information out and off your chest as the spirits tell me something to say that would get you to promote, to talk about whatever that is, or to discuss in details how to help yourself, going forward. Eventually, I will have mental health counseling as a licensed professional counselor in the state of Pennsylvania. I am finishing up my master's degree. And the reason that I went down that path is after my son died. My son was very empathic as well. But by the time I realized what was going on with him, because I was so late in life realizing what was going on with me from a spiritual connection, it was too late, and he didn't want to listen to me. He didn't want to learn to protect himself. And so he let his emotions rule his world. And those emotions are, yes, his, but then also influenced by the spirits that are around him. And after he died, I wanted to work with kids from a mental health perspective at an early age when they're going to be diagnosed with bipolar, which is empaths in the spirit world, spiritual connection, schizophrenia, which that's spiritual communication. Obviously, there's a small percentage that it truly is a dysfunction of the brain, but 99% of the time it is spiritual communication, just like bipolar is, and ADHD. It is complete spiritual communication, and the child does not know how to handle it, and so all they're doing is running around and freaking out. So whether it's a positive freak out or just, a negative. So I wanted to work with kids so I can get them at those ages when these diagnoses are starting to come into play, whether they're little or, teenagers, to avoid turning to substance abuse to self-medicate, whether it's alcohol or drugs, whether it's prescription meds, because that's the diagnosis, or not. Our brains are still developing. I mean, that's just science. It's not until we're about 25-ish that our brain is done developing. And introducing even prescription medication for depression, bipolar, schizophrenic at such a young age, even under, let's go, I think schizophrenic, if I'm remembering correctly, you're not supposed to diagnose anybody under the age of 10 or 12. But that happens. But even still at 10 or 12, our brain is still vastly still forming. And now we're introducing mind-altering drugs to it. So I wanted to help these kids so that way they can be more in tune. And if we can continue to leave our spiritual connection open, then who's to say how much our world will heal and stop this constant cycle of pain because we don't like who we are inside or don't understand who we are inside. So there's a lot that having spiritual connection from the beginning would be vastly improved. And so the way that I can do that is to have my license as a professional counselor. Because then people will seek me out instead of this, massage therapist or the spiritual healer, And then I can start to change and introduce these theories into the psychiatric world because I would have the proof to show that. So it's interesting how much I really add things into my life that not only help me, and that's the biggest thing. If it's helped me in some way, then I'll incorporate it somehow, whether it's through current techniques that I'm using or offer it as additional services. So eventually, Mind Body Soul Wellness Center truly will be Mind Body Soul Wellness Center. And when that's fully where it needs to be, obviously I won't be able to do it all, which will be hard for me because not that I'm a controlling person in any way, but I'll miss doing certain things. So I'll have to break up my time with other stuff. So that's Mind Body Soul Wellness Center. I know that was a lot of information. I hope you hung in for all that. But I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of an insight truly in what it is that I offer and why I offer it. So next week, I'm actually thinking of mini readings, and it'll either be where I allow everybody to ask questions, and I think it's going to depend on how many people I have viewing at the time. If we have a good amount of people that are watching it live, then I'll just have people ask me questions and I'll put it out there. If I don't have a lot, then we'll just switch to I just do a reading and, I connect to whoever wants to chat on the other side and just give out some information. So that's what we're going to do next week. I'll do a mini reading so that way you get a little sample of how it works. And until then, everybody send some love out in the world and positive energy, because I know it works. It might take a while, but it absolutely helps. And right now, our world needs it. So until next week, bye, everybody.